Hi, this is Janie Gianotsos. Welcome to Reinvention Ready, the place to be to make the rest of your life your best life. Today, I am thrilled to introduce my wonderful guest, Cathy Schmelter. Cathy's going to share a bit about launching her own company later in life, as well as tips on diet and nutrition to support our health as we grow older. Cathy is a registered dietitian nutritionist who completed her dietetic internship with the Mayo Clinic, so pretty impressive. She's a nutrition coach and founder of Plant-Based Nutrition for Life, where she offers online one-on-one coaching and consulting services to individuals from all over the world. And her goal is to create a very customized and personalized action plan around plants-only eating, which is a lifetime change, not a one and done to reach a number on a scale. So if you or someone you care about struggles with high cholesterol, high blood pressure, or high triglycerides, Cathy has some essential information for you that you really need to hear. So Cathy, welcome to the program today, and thanks for being here.
I'm so thrilled and excited to be here. I think this is going to be a great adventure today.
Me too. And I want to start with you talking about your company. So you weren't always a plant-based nutritionist owning your own company. You did that just recently. So tell me how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I am a registered dietitian and a longtime plant-based vegetarian, first of all, and now plants-only vegan. And how I started my journey, I actually, a long time ago, real long time ago, I was an accountant. And during that time, I was racing bicycles. And at that time, I had a coach that said, with as much as we were training and racing, that we could literally eat a whole chocolate cake afterwards. And my treat of choice was not chocolate cake. I lived on Snickers bars. And I thought I was doing great until one day I had a really bad crash. I broke my collarbone. I almost broke my neck. And I was off my bike for 6 months. And so I was really worried about keeping my fitness during that time. So I was able to convince my doctor to at least let me ride the life cycle at the gym. But at the same time, I really started reading about nutrition. And what I found was reading and learning about nutrition that I just could not get enough of it. And also when I got back on my bike, not only did I lose 10 pounds in the process, but I was also racing better. And that's when I really made the connection between food and how it makes you feel. Fast forward several years, I actually ended up writing a book on children's nutrition, which kind of landed me in working with schools. So I did that for a long time. I developed curriculum for schools and then trained teachers on how to implement it in the classroom. But I really wanted it to be more than just nutrition education. I wanted it to have a sustainability piece. So not only students learning about nutrition in their bodies, but how the food choices they make not only impact their personal health, but the environment and ones that are kind to animals.
That was your aha moment. Really,
Yeah, sort of,
yeah.
with what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that
That
was
was
your
kind of,
aha moment to get into nutrition. So yeah, how did you get to what you're doing now? Because I think when I met
yeah,
you, you were working with the children's nutrition.
yeah, I did
Yeah.
that for years and years, loved it, and it was my passion. But I did find that I was most passionate about the sustainability piece. So it was interesting. Well, working for schools obviously does not pay a lot. So I've always had to do other things on the side. And ironically, this company approached me about doing online coaching. And they are a professional organization. They work with, they do professional coaching for companies with large companies that have staff all over the world. And they wanted to bring in these nutrition specialists. So they actually reached out to me, asked me if I was interested in doing it. And so I started working with them, and it started out being just 4 hours a week. And then it kind of grew to where it was after work, before work, weekends, and now has kind of exploded. And a lot of times now I'm overbooked on that platform.
And then and this is your heart too. I mean, you were working, you're doing something that actually sings to your heart, which is wonderful.
Well, it was interesting because I never thought that I would want to do coaching because I always did like community nutrition and things like that. But once I got into this, I just realized the huge impact you can have on people. And it's so much fun when they get excited and then I get excited. And you can really see the results right away. But kind of my aha moment, if you will, is a lot of the people that I work with are age 40 plus. And I started seeing how them switching to a plant-based diet, how that was helping them to reduce things like cholesterol or their triglycerides or their blood sugar or their blood pressure. And really, really, really seeing those results is so cool.
That is cool. You're making a big difference in people's lives and helping them to do something that anybody really can do. It's a amazing lifestyle. I am vegan as well, and I can't eat any other way now. I think it's just,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I went vegan in 2011, and so it's been 12 years now,
Wow.
and I I think it kind of froze my aging to a point. It slowed it way
Mm.
down. Maybe not froze it because I'm getting a few more gray hairs and wrinkles, but it's
Aren't
like
we
my
all?
husband and I went together, and it just sort of slowed it down to, I mean,
Mhm.
everything, our numbers were better with the doctors, and I
Yeah.
was a vegetarian most of my adult life. And
Yeah.
tell you what, giving up the dairy and eggs made a difference. I never thought it would, but it did. So
Yeah.
so kudos to you for helping people with that, because I know it isn't easy. It isn't, and for a lot of people who eat meat and potatoes every day and grow up on that standard American diet that
Mhm.
includes pretty much meat and animal products
Mhm.
every time you sit down to eat just about anything. So
Yeah.
I think helping people with that is a needed thing. People don't
Yeah.
always know how to do it, and it's not as hard as they think. And I think once they try it, it's like, oh gosh, there's lots of great food to eat. So actually, let's move on to that, because I think that is such an important thing. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
and I think you have that knowledge and that expertise that people are looking for. So first question I have is, keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, I don't know, what's the next diet out there? It's so confusing. And so how do
Yeah.
you know what's the healthiest way to eat, especially as we get older?
Right. Absolutely. Well, I tend to not group those together. Um, yeah, I like to say there are fad diets, and I
Mhm.
think there still are fad diets. Every few years a new one comes along. And so I would put keto and whole 30 and paleo into more of a fad diet thing, where most people do that because they want to lose weight.
Mhm.
Versus what I like to say is focus on more healthy lifestyle eating, which is a lifetime change, not a one and done. So those are things like the plant-based vegan and vegetarian. So what I see is that some people, they do want to go on that to lose weight, but the majority of the time, what I'm seeing is they want to switch to this type of diet for health reasons, for the environment, or because they really care about animals.
Exactly, exactly. And I do want to say there's a lot of people who think going on a plant-based diet is going to automatically make you skinny. And with my husband and I, it was frustrating because we both went plant-based basically at the same time. And he had a very active job where he was moving around and doing things, and he lost almost too much weight. Me, on the other
Mhm.
hand, I gained 5 pounds. And I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
why am I gaining? And so
Yeah.
what I had to do is sit down and look at the calories that I was consuming, because
Mhm.
I was eating a lot of food, and
Mhm.
it's good food, and I was eating too much. And once I cut back my portion size and paid attention to my
Mm.
calorie intake, it's been very, very easy to keep my weight. But I'm one of those people who could be overweight very, very easily if I didn't exercise and do those things. So curious, and I've
Yeah.
always been that way. I was that way in my 20s. I was that way as I was a chubby child.
Mm.
And looking back at pictures, people are like, "That was you?" I'm like, "Yeah, that was me. I was a chubby kid." I ate a lot of,
Oh,
my mom was a
well,
good cook, and I ate a lot of cakes and cookies and probably a lot of kind of junky American food too. So,
right. Didn't we
yeah.
all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
and you can get away with that from a health perspective, maybe in your 20s and 30s, but I know they're starting to see more people that are in their 20s and 30s having high cholesterol, having high blood pressure, having these things. But when you get older, I think it's even more critical to pay attention to those numbers, because those numbers are going to cause aging problems and health problems that are so difficult to treat and can completely cramp your way of life. So, what do we need to do differently as we get older
Yeah.
versus when we could get away with eating Snickers bars and riding our bikes
Yeah.
like you did, in your
Yeah.
20s and 30s?
Right. Well, and just to kind of comment on the comment that you made about seeing heart disease and plaque in our arteries and things like that showing up. When I worked for the schools, the nurses actually started checking blood pressure, blood cholesterol with kids in elementary school,
Wow.
because it was starting to show up that young. And we've seen plaque buildup in arteries in kids as young as 2 years old. So
Two, wait,
two
say that
years old,
again. 2-year-olds have, some
2 year olds.
two-year-olds have
Yeah,
plaque in their arteries.
yeah, plaque in their
Wow.
artery.
Wow.
So, and just, the amount of, you know, unfortunately, the low socioeconomic kids that I saw that were overweight or obese, it was just really, really hard. It's really hard. For us, as we get older, I kind of have three overarching tips, and one of them you already mentioned, a couple of them you already mentioned, so I think you got it. The light bulb went off for you. But one is to pay attention to the quality of the food that you're eating, mostly plant-based, mostly whole foods, whenever possible, eating foods that provide quality. The second is quantity. We really have to reduce the amount of our portion sizes as we get older. And then the third thing is to exercise like you were in your 20s or even more so. And just as we get older, things happen where you get a job and you have kids and you have a family and all this stuff happens to where exercise kind of becomes less and less important. And as we start to age, it becomes incredibly more important for us to exercise as much as possible. And so I always say exercise like you're in your 20s. And that's the other thing that I hear from clients. They'll say, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I could pretty much eat whatever I wanted and nothing happened. I'd go out and party all weekend and then Monday I'd be fine. Now I can't even eat the slightest little bit and I gained 10 pounds, And
Hmm.
so really kind of, focusing on these three areas and just seeing how you're doing there, kind of checking in and see how you're doing there can make a
Yeah.
huge difference.
Yeah, let's explore these a little bit. I mean, let's start with exercise. And I'm a yoga teacher. And I
Uh-huh.
didn't start teaching yoga until I was 52 when I started
Mhm.
teaching yoga.
Wow.
I was
Mhm.
actually the second oldest person in my yoga teacher training class at the time. There was one gal that I think was 54. And, we buddied together because everybody else was in their 20s and 30s. I think there was one girl who was 40, and then, the two of us older folks. And it is true that so many young people do things, and then as you get older, you just stop doing them. And
Mhm.
it was fun to come into that. And I came into that with arthritis, and I have some joint issues. And if the teachers were even like, "Do you want to stop? Do you want to postpone till you get better?" And I'm like, "No, I want to take my training because this may never go away." And technically, I still have a lot of these issues, but yoga's helped a lot with it. And
Mhm.
there are so many different ways to exercise. Exercise
Mhm.
is movement. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people think exercise has to be going to the gym and lifting weights, although weight training is very
Mhm.
beneficial when you get
Yep.
older, especially for women. But there's ways to do that. You can do weight training with your own body.
Mhm.
And you can just turn on the radio and dance or take a
Yeah.
walk. We have a walk with a doc program here in Denver. There's a cardiologist, a vegan cardiologist named Andrew Freeman, who's very well known in the world of cardiology in general, and he works for National
Yeah.
Jewish Health. And they have this walk with a doc, and once a month they have doctors, and you can talk to them, and you take a 30-minute walk. And he was actually a cardiologist I went to go see when I was chubby and thought I had some heart
Oh,
issues.
wow.
Fortunately, I didn't. But he
Mm,
told me, he said, you need to exercise 30 minutes a day. I said, okay,
mm,
can I do that in two 15-minute increments? Because I was working full time and had life.
mhm,
And he
mm,
said, nope. He said, you need to exercise 30 minutes a day, 6 days a week. You could take one day
mm,
off. Oh my
uh,
gosh. But I did. I started doing it. I got on an
uh,
elliptical machine and I would check my emails and kind of work from the elliptical. I still do that today as well as yoga, and try to walk as much as I can, take a walk. And I don't feel like it's been hard to implement that
mm,
exercise into my life. Park
right.
farther away when you go into the store. Instead of parking the closest spot, take a farther away spot.
Mm,
Walk on your lunch hour, bring a healthy lunch to work. There's so many different ways to get movement in.
right.
Do your clients struggle with that? I'm curious. What do they?
Absolutely. And I really, especially as we get older, right, our joints start to tighten a little bit. So that's where the yoga comes in, yoga, stretching, especially now with everyone working from home and sitting all day, those things can start to tighten up. So I always say do a wide variety of physical activities. So a couple days of cardio, couple days of weightlifting, walking's good. The first 10 minutes you're walking, you're burning carbs. After that, you're burning fat. And so it just depends on how long you're walking for. So I generally say, if you do cardio for a half hour, do walk for like 40 to 45 minutes to kind of have some of the same impact there. But I talk a lot with people that have kids, and it's really hard for them to fit exercise in. So we'll talk about having some weights on their desk, and then in between meetings lifting weights. I had one client whose company would not let them have their camera on, so he would just lift weights all day. I was doing that. The other thing I talk about is walking meetings, integrating that in when you have a meeting that's not too critical, or you're not meeting with the higher ups kind of thing, is really kind of just walking and talking. And maybe you have a colleague that likes to walk and talk, and you could do that together, and you could kind of hold each other accountable. There's a lot of different things you can do, but I think getting a wide variety of physical activities in, especially since we want to support our bones, the weight bearing exercises are really important for that.
Excellent, excellent advice. And so the other things, let's say you talked about, were eating real food, whole food.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
boy, oh boy, I will tell you, having been vegan since 2011, in 2011, there wasn't any vegan junk food except for maybe the original junk food like potato
Oh,
chips and corn chips, which
wow.
just happen to be vegan, and Oreo cookies, which just happen to be vegan. But for the most part, you had to make your own food. So I was cooking beans and, making stir fries and different kinds of things with real food. And now
Hmm.
it's like, oh my gosh, I can get vegan soup, and I can get
Hmm.
vegan cake, and I could get
Yeah.
vegan this, that, and chips, and snacks. And so maybe can you address a little bit about why it's important to eat those whole foods? When we talk about whole food, plant-based, what does that mean?
Yeah, because you essentially want to eat foods that you can essentially pick from the ground and eat. Potatoes, carrots, those kinds of things are really good because then the whole nutrients are what we call intact. So they give you more nutritional benefit, where the highly processed foods, there's a lot more research that's coming out on those and how they have an impact on our health, especially. So when you eat these foods, they might not be digested or absorbed as well. And so what happens is they travel to your brain, and they can mess with the neurotransmitters in your brain. So they can cause things like depression or anxiety or, all of these kinds of things, because they're not digested and absorbed as well. But there's a lot of debate about that. And one thing that I say for sure is there's no nutrition in chemicals. There's no nutrition in these additives and preservatives. And a lot of times people that have digestive issues, it makes them worse. One thing that I found recently is, with pasta, for example, a lot of people like yourself that are gluten intolerant can't eat pasta in the United States, but they can eat it when they go to Italy.
I've heard
Uh,
that. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and then there was this other woman that started this company. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Jovial. And they make einkorn wheat pasta, which is pasta in its wheat in its original form.
Oh, wow.
And the reason this woman started this company was her daughter was gluten intolerant, and she wanted to see if eating wheat in its original form, if her daughter would be able to digest that. And she was. And so that's what inspired her to start this company with using real wheat back in its original form. So you get so much more nutritional value from these kind of whole grains.
So if you flip that package over and you see, oh, this has potatoes and maybe a tiny bit of sunflower oil and salt,
Yeah.
that's a better thing to eat than one that's got 18 ingredients and you can only pronounce the first maybe 3 ingredients and everything else is a mile long and who knows what it is.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I always say, like, when I'm talking about choosing more whole foods over processed foods, I'm not talking about turning peanuts into peanut butter, because that's fun. That's exciting. Like you said, there's a lot more variety than if you eat those kinds of foods. But what I'm talking about is the ones that have a list of 100 ingredients in there. We used to do this activity in schools where we would have students examine their favorite snack label, and they had to list out all the ingredients and find out what the ingredients does and how it impacted their health. And one of the teachers said, can we limit the number of ingredients to 15? And I said, you have a snack that has more than 15 ingredients? And she said, yeah, there was one with almost 60 ingredients in it that the student could not pronounce. So those are the ones that I'm talking about that are, really have a detrimental impact on our health.
Eating your shampoo, I mean, you wouldn't do that. Or your yoga mat. What was that? There was the same thing that was in a yoga mat that was in a bread, I remember years ago. It's like, don't eat that stuff. Yeah, just don't eat that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I watched a thing on 60 Minutes one time, and they were talking about how their natural flavors were from beaver glands. I mean, it's so those natural flavors are the other one. Like, I usually will contact the company to find out what exactly is your natural flavorings. Yeah.
Right. So if the product is marked plant-based or vegan, it's probably not natural flavorings from the beaver. It's probably from a tree or a plant. So
yeah, and that's the interesting thing too. The other thing you have to watch with vegan products is, even though they're certified vegan, they could still be manufactured in a plant that manufactures things like milk and eggs and other things like that. So like the einkorn wheat that I mentioned, that's manufactured in a company that also manufactures these other things. So it can be a little bit tricky at times. That's why the whole foods are better, because you know what's in them.
Right. My husband struggles with dairy. He's vegan too, but if we buy chocolate that doesn't have dairy in the ingredient list, but it's made in a facility, he can tell. I mean, he can actually feel it in his gut. He's that sensitive. So
Yeah.
that's more chocolate for me. But then again, maybe I shouldn't be eating that because it does mean I'm getting some dairy products. So yeah.
Yeah. And there is a brand called Evolved. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they do not use equipment that manufactures milk or eggs or any of that kind of stuff.
So does Taza. There are a few brands out there, and
Yeah.
you got to get the back of the package and read that label,
I
you know.
know.
And
I know.
speaking of labels, we talked about calories too, and that is, I think, a biggie. And what I find so interesting with calories is you'll flip over something, it'll say, and let's say it's a can, you know, and it's a
Hmm.
can that would fit into a bowl, a normal size bowl that we would eat soup out of, but it says there's 2.5 servings in the can, and
Yeah.
it's soup. And so it's like, well, I
Hmm.
have to take that calorie number, multiply it by 2.5, and that's what I'm really getting in this can.
Yeah.
It's not
Right.
100 calories, it's 250
Right.
calories or whatever. And yeah, and I think it's easy for people to think a serving is, you know, sometimes a serving is a half a cookie or some stupid thing like that. So we have to
Yeah.
really pay attention. Calorie wise, I don't know how many of your clients, if you talk to them about BMR, but that was what kind of opened my eyes as I got older, and that
Hmm.
we have this basal metabolic rate, BMR,
Right.
that as we get older, it slows down. And I don't know if it slows down, and maybe you can answer this question for me. Does it
Oh,
slow down
yeah.
because we slow down and we're doing less? So when you say exercise
Mm.
like you're 20, your
Yeah.
BMR is going to stay like a 20-year-old,
Uh-huh.
versus it just slows down simply like our bones and our joints start to get
Yeah.
old and weaker, and you know, we lose some of that cartilage, and that just isn't our eyes and needing reading glasses. Is that the case, or is it something we can take charge of and pay attention to how more efficiently we can burn those calories so we can enjoy bigger servings?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very real that your metabolism slows down. Some other things that happen is your hormones are going up and down. That's challenging. As we get older, we lose more muscle mass and we gain more fat, especially around our abdomen area, which can be connected to a lot of disease if we have too much fat around our abdomen area. um, we don't sleep as well. We can develop insulin resistance, which makes it very hard for us to lose weight. Yeah, so there's all kinds of changes that are very real. And I think what comes to top of mind is just the health issues. People that have never had high blood sugar, now all of a sudden their blood sugar is just out of control. And so that's something different that happens as we get older.
Wow. Yeah. So it's just, I mean, but like you say, if we can pay attention to what we're eating, eat the right amount of it, and keep moving,
Yeah.
that's probably the best that we can do then. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times with clients, I'll have them log in an app to see where they're really at, and they're really surprised.
Hmm.
Oh, I just had a snack here, I just had a snack there, and oh my gosh, and you need to eat less calories because your metabolism is slowing down,
Yep.
and that's hard for some people too when they were used to eating as much as they wanted and never gaining a pound. So,
Hmm. I did that. I used it. MyFitnessPal was the app that I used to. I ended up losing about 30 pounds because
mhm,
I knew I needed to lose weight. The doctor was saying exercise, but and he said to me, he said, well, I like it when older people have a little bit of extra fat on their bones. And that actually
mhm.
did not make me feel good. That means, oh, I have extra fat on my, I was like,
Out of my bones.
right on the cusp of being overweight, you know, where
Mm,
when you look at that BMI chart too, it's like sometimes people are surprised that, oh, well, actually this is overweight. This isn't a healthy weight. And so I got
mm,
myself down to where I'm kind of in that middle of the BMR
mm.
chart, maybe a little bit towards the lower end of it, just gives myself a little cushion. But I did
Yeah.
that by cutting calories down to 1,200 calories a day and
Mhm.
exercising more. And those two things over the course of, it was not fast. I mean, it took probably 6 months, and it was hard. You know, that 1,200 calories is not nearly as much as you think it is, which is why
Mhm.
those whole food plant-based items are great, because you can eat a lot of leafy greens, you can
Lot
eat
of
a lot of
them.
broccoli, and even
Mhm.
carrots that sometimes get a bad rap for having sugar don't have a lot of calories in them. So I started reading labels and paying attention, and my husband could eat like 2,400 calories because he was moving all day long. So I
Mm,
could eat half as much as he could, you know, and so beginning to understand what a portion size looked
mm,
like. And I heard that plates, I guess if you go back to the 1930s, a plate was about 8 inches, a dinner plate.
mhm.
Nowadays, they're 13 inches in circumference.
Right. Yeah.
So you filled an 8 inch plate, it's a very different
Yeah.
portion size than filling a 13-inch plate. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah. And especially like I spend a lot of time with clients on mindful eating because of the fact that a lot of what they're doing now, they learned back in childhood. So if people were raised with the Clean Your Plate Club parents,
Well, that was
they
me.
tend to,
Mhm.
they tend to carry that into adulthood.
Mhm.
And I'll usually ask them, like, what did that look like? And, it was, we can't waste food, and you need to get all your vitamins and minerals. So we just pile it on. Whereas, kids that were raised intuitively eating, so they eat when they're hungry and they stop when they're full, they have better eating habits when they get older.
Mm. Yeah, so good advice to parents out there, maybe grandparents out there, to kind of let those kids set their barometer for.
Yeah. And it's hard because sometimes they just don't like vegetables, and
Mm.
so that, because they're super tasters, so whatever we taste, they taste like 100 times stronger.
Oh, really?
um
Wow. I didn't know
yeah, so
that. Oh my gosh.
they're super tasters. So that's why fruit is so much more appealing to them, because it
Huh.
tastes sweeter, versus the veggies, they kind of have a bitter taste, and they taste more bitter then.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. Yeah, as a kid, I hated fruit. And,
Yeah.
and it just tasted,
Wow. Okay.
I think it was like too intense for me or something. I don't know.
Uh,
I didn't like it. Now I
maybe.
love it. But
Yeah.
my mother would make me sit there and eat a peach. I remember. I was like, "Ooh,
Oh,
it'll
yeah.
be an hour for me
Well,
to eat the peach, you know?
yeah. And then you then probably didn't like peaches as you got older,
I did actually. I outgrew it. It
Oh,
was,
you
I
did?
don't know
Okay.
what the deal was with it, but I didn't
Okay.
realize that kids can taste. That's good to know. So if you're trying to disguise vegetables in a tomato-based sauce or something, I mean, that may not work as well, but I hear
Mhm.
trying to do some of those things with kids, putting chocolate smoothies with lots of vegetables in them and things like that, for them to drink. But
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Hmm.
And you had mentioned hormones too. And so I'm curious, men and women, and as we get older, are there differences in dietary needs? I know, like with my husband and I, he could eat a lot more than I could. He lost weight
Mm,
faster than I could.
yeah.
What would you advise men and women if they're trying to be healthier? What's the difference?
Yeah. So the reason for that is men tend to have more muscle than we do, and we tend to have more fat because of childbearing. So once you get past that, you still continue to have that. With women, so a lot of the things that we're experiencing are the same, like I mentioned, the high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol, high blood sugar, even our guts, that's something that I've been learning about lately, is just how, as we get older, how much our guts change. And so it's harder to digest things, and we might have more stomach issues, that kind of thing. So in general, that's the same for men and women. But women, we go through perimenopause and menopause, which is different. And for men, the risk of prostate cancer is real. So preventing and treating that, or even lower testosterone levels, that can cause some issues as well. So that's kind of the main differences between the two. But in general, we're all kind of on the same journey.
Hmm.
So,
And a
mhm.
lot of the advice applies to men and women equally, like eating the whole foods, moving
The
more,
whole
paying
foods,
attention
moving
to how
more.
much you're eating. Yeah. Reading the labels, making sure you can pronounce all the ingredients on the back.
Yeah.
All great
And
information.
getting
Yeah.
enough sleep. That's something that becomes even more important as we get older,
Oh,
is making
yeah.
sure we're getting enough sleep.
And then I'm curious now, there's a lot of whole foods out there that are healthy, but are there any items or food that would fall under that whole food category that people should limit or avoid as they get older?
Not so much under the whole food category that people should limit or avoid, but more under things that we should avoid all the time. So less added sugars. And I say added sugars because whole sugars in like fruit, for example, do not have the same impact on our body as processed sugar does. So it's the added sugars that we really need to watch out for. And eating too many added sugars over time can lead to high triglycerides, which can cause heart issues down the road. Watching your intake of salt. And again, a lot of this advice is It doesn't matter if you're younger or older, it kind of applies, but just watching how much added salt that you're eating as well, because that can lead to high blood pressure. And then limiting meat or eliminating meat is another really good practice, because we're finding more and more data on especially red meat and its connection to heart disease and cancer.
Mhm. Very true. Very true.
Another thing I would
Oh,
say,
yeah. Yeah.
the last thing I would say is, as women, we actually need to eat less iron as we get older,
Oh,
because once we've gone through menopause and we're no longer menstruating, we don't need that extra amount of iron. So our iron needs actually go down to the same as they are for men, which is about 8 milligrams a day.
wow. Well, that's good to know. What about oil? I know coconut oil and this MCT adding oil to everything. I mean, that's plant-based, but what would you recommend as far as oil intake for people?
Yeah, a lot of people, so there's differing opinions on this. And I actually just read an article with dietitians that were debating this. So everybody has their own opinion about it. A lot of my clients like olive oil, and so I tend to go with, what they like. And But just really making sure that it's well made olive oil. UC Davis did a study several years ago where they found that a lot of the olive oil that were consuming was actually a blend of refined canola oil, refined soybean oil, all these different oils in there. And because it's not regulated by the FDA, they didn't have to put ingredients on there. They could call anything extra virgin olive oil. So really kind of making sure that you're getting the right kind of oil. So the best oil to get is one that does say extra virgin olive oil, one that says cold pressed. I don't know if you know what cold pressed is.
It's not a process, right? It's like they actually squeeze the oil out of the olives.
Squeeze the oil out of the olive. And then making sure that there is one ingredient on there, so extra virgin olive oil, and then it's third-party certified. So those companies come in and they check to make sure that it has purity and quality along with it. So looking for that seal is important. I always say if you can find out where your oil comes from. My sister lives in Arizona, and they actually have an olive farm there that I visited. And you got to see them pick the olives. They have this little machine, they process it and put it in the bottles. So
That's about
that's the
as
best
natural as you're going to
kind.
get. It's your
Yeah.
sister's olive farm. That's fun.
Yeah, in Arizona of all
Oh
places,
my
right?
gosh.
But one thing too, that I generally recommend is, not to fry with the olive oil, but steam your vegetables and then add some spices in on that, and then just a drizzle of olive oil. So just
Right.
drizzling it
At the
is,
end rather than, yeah, I've
yeah.
heard a lot of the doctors, if you have heart, like clogged artery,
Mhm.
arterial sclerosis. I don't know if I said
Yeah.
that right, but
Yeah.
the clogging of the arteries, they say no oil at all,
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
teeny little amount, like you say, olive oil at the end of the process, just for
Yeah.
flavoring, not for cooking with it. And you can
Yeah.
saute vegetables in some water or some veggie broth. There's a lot of
Mhm.
options on making your food taste good without oil. My doctor has told me no coconut oil, stay away from it, because it's saturated and it's tasty and I
Mm.
love it. But I tend to have high cholesterol, and as a vegan, that's unusual. I think it's genetic because of the way
Mm.
I'm eating. I shouldn't, but if I stay away from olive oils and go easy on my beloved chocolate, I tend to not have high cholesterol at all. So I do find that for me personally, that's an issue. And my doctor has said that. So I think if people, talk to your doctor, talk to a nutritionist if you have these health concerns, and make sure you're not making it worse, even though you're plant-based, because not
Yeah.
everything plant-based is healthy, as we've talked about. So
Yeah, and that's to your point. I think that there is not one size fits all for everyone. I have people that do really well on high fat. I have clients that do not do well on fat, and they actually need to limit their fat. So it really is individualized. And that's what I try to do. I usually do an assessment with clients when I first meet with them to really find out some of these things and what's working for them and what's not, and what kind of adjustments we need to make based on where they're at.
Right. I think that's great. One size doesn't fit all. And you
Mhm.
need to talk to somebody like Cathy if you want to make some improvements, and she's going to work with you personally. So I think that's so important. So thank you for,
Yeah, I think that's one thing I've learned over the years. It's these cookie cutter diets just don't work for everyone. And I think that's why there's so much confusion about nutrition, is because, someone will say, this is the way to go. And then someone else will try it and go, no, that didn't work at all for me. So
Mhm.
really getting to the point of what works for your body and how does your body respond to it.
Mhm. Exactly. And using those numbers, getting your blood tested, checking your blood pressure,
Yeah.
uh, verify it with science and how you
Mhm.
feel, I think too, learning to listen as a yogi. We tune into our bodies, and a lot of times your body has things to say. You can tell after you eat if you feel better or you don't feel better, if you feel
Mhm.
energized or you feel tired, and pay attention to that, because sometimes that's your body telling you this is good for me or this is not beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree 100% with what you just said. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Wow. Well, Cathy, this has been just awesome. I learned a ton. I can't believe 2-year-olds can have, plaque buildup in their arteries. That makes me sad. I think we
It
need
is very
to make a
sad.
lot of changes as a nation, and I think you are one of those awesome people who are helping people to make those changes. And I hope if people are listening and they're older, that maybe they share this episode with their kids and their grandkids and let them listen, because I think what you're saying applies not just to growing older, but to so many of us that need
Mhm.
to eat better and take better care of ourselves. And I will say, the younger you start, the better it is. So
Yeah.
everybody keeps saying that the 60 is going to be like 40, and that
Yes.
kids that are, I just read somewhere that kids that are 5 years old right now, 2023, when they get to be 100, it
Mhm.
will be that's their life expectancy. So
Mm.
our life expectancy is like 70 to 80,
Right.
they're going to have
Right.
20 more years of life expectancy. And
Yeah.
why not make it good life? I think that's what I find. We're going to get old regardless, but if we can be 80 and still practicing yoga and riding bikes and doing the things we love, picking up our grandkids and, visiting the world and doing the things we want to do, we have to start taking care of ourselves and taking care of our nutrition as soon as we can and paying
Yeah.
attention.
And
Yeah.
you're right, the quality of life. I read an article recently from Google, that Google's actually doing research on how they can get people to live to be 150.
Now, I'm cool with that if I can have my health.
Yeah.
If
If
I'm
you can have your
150 and
health,
I'm going to
right?
sit in a nursing home and watch TV that I don't care about and not know anybody, I don't
Yeah.
want that. So,
Right.
yeah,
I agree. And I hear that from a lot of people like, oh, I don't know if I want to live that long.
yeah, yeah. Yes,
So,
if I can be healthy, sure, why not? Wouldn't that be amazing to say, I remember when, and you're 150 years old, but you got to remember when, and you got to be able to talk about it, and enjoy your life. Enjoyment and life quality is critical. It's
exactly. I agree with that. One
yeah.
other thing I wanted to mention is, um, I read something recently. I was reading a book on menopause, and just how that is more than just a physical journey, with our health and
Mhm.
things like that, that it's also an emotional one. And a
Wow.
lot of times what happens is people end up becoming more depressed as they get older because of the changes that they're going through, the health issues, those kinds of things. So really giving yourself some grace and accepting your changing body, that this is where you're at right now, and just kind of being at peace with that.
And that can be hard for people. I know it's odd, when you grow
Yeah.
old and you start to realize that in a business meeting, you're the oldest person in the room. I remember
Oh
being
yeah.
the youngest person in the room. And
Yeah.
now I'm oftentimes the oldest person in the room. I'm the
Mhm.
oldest person in the company that I work for right now. My boss and his wife are younger than I am, and everybody else is younger than they are. And
Yeah.
it's you start to really realize that life is finite, and you're changing. The phase that you're going into is different than where you were
Yeah.
before. And again, it is, some days are tough. And I think you're right to just be okay and accept. I have a picture of myself, my yoga picture, my profile picture, and I had it taken, and it's like I can see the wrinkles and stuff. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to embrace the wrinkles because they're there. I'm going to embrace the gray hair. I'm going to take the best care of myself that I can. And I saw a little meme one time that said, embrace growing old because it's a gift not given to everyone.
Wow, I love that. That's a great
Mhm.
saying.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you so much for what you're doing in the world to help people be healthier. And I wanted to ask you too, you have a care kit that you
Yeah,
had mentioned, and can you
yeah.
share a little bit about that? How can people get that? What is it?
Yeah, so right now I have, a plant-based care kit for people that are transitioning to a plant-based diet. Have done a lot of testing on this, did it a lot of different ways, and come to find out that works best is, usually what I'll do is I'll send out like between 9 and 10 different kinds of foods, and along with a booklet that kind of explains why these foods are important, and gives them some recipes to do with this food. In a few weeks, we're going to have our Heart Healthy kit out, which I'm really excited about. I've been testing different recipes and stuff for it, and I think it's going to be really fun. So it has, like I said, between 9 and 10 different food items in it, but then why that's important for people to prevent heart disease, and what each ingredient does, and then some recipes that they can make along with it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you know what I'd love for your next one to be is as how to help people with their brain health. So dementia,
Yeah,
Alzheimer's. What can we eat for that? Because I think actually we didn't talk about that. If you have a second to share anything
yeah.
you might be able to make beneficial for people worried about that.
Yeah. Well, I always say eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, and I'm kind of a fruit and veggie nerd, so I do study a lot about fruits and veggies and the impact on them. One of the colors that is really good for our brains are the blue and purple ones. Not only are they good for our heart because they contain this ingredient called resveratrol, and resveratrol actually can go up and heal our arteries. It can get rid of plaque and heal the arteries that are left afterwards. But the biggest thing is that it can have a significant impact on our brain. And blueberries are the ones that they're studying extensively to see if there's been some preliminary research that has shown that eating blueberries on a regular basis can not only prevent Alzheimer's, but it can treat it afterwards.
Wow, that's amazing. So do you have to eat the actual food or can you take resveratrol?
You can take resveratrol. You can, yeah, if you feel like, "Oh, I just can't eat another blueberry." I know a lot of my clients love berries, especially blueberries. Like that's a big one because they're usually sweet most of the year. But if you don't, you can take resveratrol. I generally recommend the liquid kinds. I'm a liquid supplement person because it acts quicker, and I feel like they're more effective that way. And so there's actually little shots you can do of resveratrol.
Oh, that's cool. And curious too, when you talk about blueberries, what is the best way? Obviously, if you can go pick them yourself, that's going to be the best way to eat them. But fresh, frozen, canned, supplement. I mean, how would you give people advice on the best way to get that nutrition into your body?
Yeah, the fresh is always best, I feel, but there's a lot of debate on that. Some people feel that frozen is better, so I usually say fresh or frozen are the best ones. The canned ones, I don't necessarily think I've ever seen a lot of blueberries in cans, but I'm sure there is. But sometimes they're, soaked in juice or water or syrup that makes them not as healthy, and that can kind of break down the nutrients over time. So I personally like the fresh and the frozen better as options, but a lot of people feel that the frozen are better because most of our food travels about 1,500 miles to get to us. Even stuff we grow here, we export it out and then we import it back in. It's kind of a crazy system. Um, yeah.
Wow.
But yeah. So some people feel because of how far that food travels that the nutrients break down during that process. And like for tomatoes, for example, a lot of tomatoes are picked before they're ripe so that they can survive that transport. Versus when you let tomatoes ripen and then you process them for like a can, in this case a can, that they retain more of their nutrition that way.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah. So, but vegetables definitely are good for you, and however you get them in is probably better than not eating them at all.
Yeah, the more the better, I always say. And some people say, well, how many do I need a day? Do I need 5 a day? Well, if you're starting at 0 and going to 5, that can be a little bit, disheartening. So I generally just say add more and then continue to add more. And that every meal, and if possible, the snacks that you're eating have fruits or vegetables in them.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. And ketchup is ketchup a vegetable?
I would consider ketchup a vegetable. There's not a lot of nutrition in there, and there's usually a lot of sugar in
Right?
it.
That's so true. More sugar than tomato, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a more highly processed type food. I'm not saying you shouldn't have ketchup, and there are some with no sugar in them now that you can get, but yeah,
Yeah.
ketchup's not vegetable.
All right. So, Cathy, are there any parting words of wisdom you would like to share with our audience, and also tell us where people can find you and how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would say just to keep going, whether it's with, a new business. This is my second business that I've had. So making that transition with your business or with your health, it can be really bumpy, and it could be a little bit scary. But what I've found personally is I always come out better on the other side.
That's great. That's great. And you have a website, new website?
Yes, I do. I have a website. It's www.plantbasednutritionforlife.com. And then you can also find us on Facebook. I do a lot of recipes. I do restaurant reviews. I do product reviews on there, and sometimes, hopefully soon, I'll have more blog information on there. But you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or even Twitter.
Great,
Haven't gotten
great.
to the TikTok yet.
I've seen a lot of your great posts on LinkedIn. I think you have Meatless Monday posts every Monday, and I
Mhm.
love to see what you have to share. Great recipes as well. So, and healthy
Oh,
ones,
thank you.
healthy,
Definitely.
cookable, doable recipes, which is what we need. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's important to me, not just focusing on food that's healthy, but food that tastes good as well and that we enjoy.
Right, right. Yeah, eating is enjoyable. And I think when people realize that a lot of the spices that they eat and the flavors that they get are not coming from the animal products, we put those on the animal products. So if you learn to put those on beans or on rice or on vegetables and fruits, and you get that spice, that flavor with the plant-based products. So I think people are always surprised that, oh, this actually tastes good. It doesn't taste like cardboard. It has a reputation, a bad reputation that needs to go away, because plant-based food is delicious. I
It
can
is
attest to
delicious. And
that.
yeah, and one of the examples that I use is making tacos, for example. If you use like a whole corn tortilla, so that's kind of your carb, and then you add your protein, so you can add some beans to it, well, spiced beans, and then adding a variety of veggies to it. So I like to do like bell peppers, onions, zucchini, garlic, just mix them all together, put that on top. And then I always make homemade salsa and guacamole. So that adds even more to your fruit and vegetable
Oh, you're
content.
making me hungry, Kathy. That's
And
good.
then lots of spices, and you can change the recipe. So a meal can be as simple as that.
Mhm.
And you can change the recipe depending on what you want the flavor to be. So if you want it to be Mexican, you can add chipotle powder or maybe a splash of cayenne or some cumin or oregano. So all those different spices, when they come together, they can really add a lot of flavor.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. The spice of life. We love it. All right. Well, Cathy, again, I thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all your wonderful wisdom. I hope people are going to listen to this episode and make some changes, some positive changes in their life and live a longer, healthier, happy life. So thank you again so much for being a wonderful guest. I may have to have you back and maybe we can dig a little deeper into some of these other
Yeah,
topics because I'm curious. I think they're really fun and beneficial for people to understand.
absolutely. I would love to come back. This was really fun and very enjoyable. And thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome, Cathy. I learned so much today from Cathy, and I hope you did too. If you enjoy these videos, please like and subscribe and visit our webpage, reinventionready.com, to learn more about making the rest of your life your best life. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.